Hey folks, Jessica here. So a long while back I made a beginner's guide on weapon grids in Granblue Fantasy. That guide is still fairly accurate today, but it's starting to show its age. So today I'm going to be doing an updated version for 2020. For a lot of you this is going to be stuff you already know, but if you are a beginner trying to figure out how the game works, this will be a great place to get started. Today's guide will focus specifically on the weapon grid as it is the most complicated part of the game, but also the most important part for getting stronger. What is a weapon grid? It's essentially what you're seeing here. It's an arrangement of 10 weapons. In the left-hand slot is your main hand weapon, and then there's 9 other weapons. Your grid dictates how hard your team will hit, how much HP they will have, and a litany of other things like how often your team will multi-attack. Essentially, your grid dictates how effective you are in this game. Most of the time you spend in Granblue is going to be spent acquiring and upgrading various weapons. Let's take a closer look at a weapon. All weapons have an attack stat and an HP stat. This is dictated by their level. As you can see, this is level 1 out of 40. It will also have an element, in this case water, and a weapon type, which is a dagger. It will usually also have a skill on it, we'll talk about that in a second, and a charge attack. The charge attack only matters if you're using this weapon as a main hand weapon. A thing to note about the level of the weapon is it is capped based on how many stars the weapon is. So as you can see here, this is a 0-star weapon out of a potential 5. One of the big tasks in the game will be uncapping the weapons to their maximum potential star rating, which will therefore allow you to get them to maximum level to give you the maximum stats. In addition to that though, several weapons will also have skills that only unlock at higher star ratings / levels, so that's going to be a major focus. Briefly, let's talk about how to upgrade a weapon and how to uncap a weapon, and then we will talk about what the stats actually mean and which ones you should focus on. If you click upgrade, it'll bring you to the upgrade screen here, and as you can see, you can feed any of these weapons into this weapon to give it more XP. The amount of XP you get will be based on the weapon being fed into the weapon you're trying to upgrade. However, that's not to say you should feed any weapon into any weapon. There's a specific type of weapon you should use to level up other weapons, and that's called an angel weapon. If you click filter, like I just did, and then you go to the series tab, group 2, filter for upgraders, and it will bring up these plus marks, which we're not going to worry about right now, and these, which are angel weapons. Angel weapons are only intended to be used to level up other weapons. That's really the only thing you use them for, and it's the only thing you should use to upgrade others' weapons levels. Everything else has more value for other reasons than upgrading a level. So remember that. Don't use anything but angel weapons to level up a weapon. In order to uncap a weapon, you just click the uncap button, bringing up this screen. And as you can see, this is the Leviathan Gaze Omega. I will uncap it by feeding it a copy of itself. That is the primary way you uncap weapons. There's another way, but there's some caveats. You can use power-ups such as Damascus bars and gold bars to uncap a weapon. However, in the case of Damascus is extremely limited. You can't really farm it infinitely. So you only want to use it on a weapon that you are extremely sure is worth it. You never want to use Damascus on a weapon that can be farmed, that can drop from a boss. If you need another copy of the weapon to uncap it, just keep on killing boss until you drop another copy. I don't care if it takes a ton of farming, that's usually a better choice than using Damascus. Damascus is primarily used to uncap weapons that can only be acquired through gacha, i.e. limited weapons, grand weapons. Weapons are very rare. Those ones also you want to do research before you consider putting Damascus into them because they're not all worth it. Basically, if you're going to spend Damascus to uncap something, it needs to be something that you can't farm and something that is considered powerful within the current meta of the game. So you're going to have to do research before you think about spending it. Do not spend it willy-nilly, because I really mean it. You will regret it later. All those same caveats apply to gold bars, but even more so, because gold bars are even more exclusive than Damascus bars, and while they can uncap a weapon, the primary use of them is actually other things, like unlocking specific characters. So do not use a gold bar to uncap something unless you are super sure you know what you're doing. And if you know what you're doing enough to even consider using a gold bar to uncap a weapon, this video is probably not for you. And as I was saying, one of the primary things you get from uncapping a weapon is a higher level cap, but also it gives you a higher skill level cap, and certain weapons have skills that are locked behind being at a certain level. So for example, on this Sunya, I can only get this enmity effect if this weapon's level 150, which means it has to be fully uncapped to 4 stars. So keep that in mind as well. Some potentially confusing points about element to get out of the way. The element of your main hand weapon, so this water staff, would dictate the element of your main character while using that grid. So in this case, Jita is water since she's using a water weapon. However, the element of weapons in the grid don't expressly matter on their own. It's the skills on the weapon that dictate whether or not you want to put them in your grid. So this is a water grid, but I'm using 2 light staves, and that's fine because their skills align with what I'm trying to do. Similarly, there's a dark staff here, and that's fine. In this grid, their attack still counts fully even though they're off element. It's the skills, though, that are the part you need to pay attention to. So what do I mean by skills dictating whether or not a weapon belongs in grid? Well, let's look at a Gandring. Gandring is big boost to dark allies attack. So obviously I want to use it on a team that has dark characters. So this is a dark grid, and I'm using dark characters, so a weapon that says big boost to dark allies fits perfectly here, and that's the proper way to put a grid together. Similarly, Jita is also dark element because she is using a dark main hand. So to quickly recap there, you want the skills on the weapon you're using to align with the team you're using. So this is a dark team, I'm using a weapon that boosts dark allies. That's set up correctly. This, however, is a light team, so I'm going to be using weapons that boost specifically light attack. So that's how that works. It's fairly straightforward once you think about it, but that's a point that can trip some people up. So beyond uncapping your weapons and leveling them to gain more attack, there's one more major factor in upgrading a weapon, and that is the skill level of the weapon. So this Leviathan Gaze Omega is brand new, so its skill level is 1. Right now, its skill cap is going to be 10. So I want to get this to level 10 skill, because as the skill level goes up, this bonus is going to get bigger and bigger. And your uncapped level beyond 3 stars, so when it becomes 4 star, will increase this level cap to 15. And then when it goes to 5 star, the level cap will become 20. So that's important to maximum skill level the weapon. So how do you skill up a weapon? You click upgrade here, bring up this UI. Now you can feed any weapon that has its own skills into this weapon to give it a chance of increasing its skill level. And you feed multiple of them. So every R I put in here gives me 12% chance. It takes 8 of these things to fully give me a 100% chance of scaling up this weapon. Now, you can feed with less than a full 100%, but I don't recommend that because if it fails, you're wasting a lot of resources. Additionally, if you feed a higher rarity weapon, so an SR or an SSR, you're going to get a higher chance up per weapon. Now, the amount of weapons it's going to take to skill up a weapon will increase as the weapon skill goes up higher. So, like, taking a weapon from 1 to 2 is not going to take as much as something going from 9 to 10. And, like, 19 to 20, it's going to take an absolute crap ton. What weapon should you be feeding is another good question. There are these weapons like these jewels that are only used for skill leveling. However, there's not a lot of sources of those, so you're not going to have the luxury of just exclusively using these most of the time. What you typically end up doing is feeding just any old weapon in here to skill up this thing. There's a few weapons you should avoid doing this with, though. You obviously should not feed a weapon to another weapon if you intend to use the weapon you're feeding, because obviously it goes away forever. If you want to use a weapon, don't throw it into another weapon because it destroys it. Beyond that, you don't really want to use weapons that are from gacha, premium weapons, basically. Because you can, they'll still give you a skill chance up, but typically these things give you more resources if you reduce them than if you reduce a weapon that's farmable. We'll get into reduction in another video. That's not that important to know here, but just know that these are better saved for reduction than for feeding. Typically what you use to skill up things are going to be easily farmable weapons that you don't care about. So like these Colossus gauntlets here, you're going to get thousands of these. The Leviathan guns, you're going to get thousands of these. Same thing with a bunch of like these SSRs, like these Colossus swords. it's an SSR, so you might be tempted to keep it, but you're going to get a lot of those over time, and the Colossus Katana is complete garbage. You're not going to actually ever use that in a grid legitimately, so that's fine to feed. So keep all that stuff in mind. Now, there is a chart that shows basically the best combination of Rs and SRs and SSRs and skill levels to feed to get to the next level. I'll link to that in the description down below. My recommendation would be, if you're looking to skill up something and you don't know what you're doing, just consult the chart and it'll give you the best path to getting to the next skill level. Let's recap what we've learned so far. You want to increase a weapon's level in order to increase its attack and HP stat. You want to pick a weapon whose skill matches the team you're using. So in this case, I'm playing a dark team, dark characters, dark main character, so this thing boosts dark allies, that's good there. You want to increase the skill level of the weapon in order to increase that boost. Now there's more to that. You can see here this symbol. This is the weapon skill symbol. There's this little small symbol in the top left. That is the symbol for Omega. That means this is an Omega weapon skill. By the way, if you hear the term Magna, Magna means Omega. It's just the Japanese terminology for Omega. I hate that there's a split there, it's very confusing, but there's a lot of terms in Granblue where there's a split between the JP terminology and the NA terminology. It's just how it is. So why does it matter that this is an Omega skill? Note the name of this, by the way, Mistfall's Might. Mistfall is the name for any dark Omega skill, so keep that in mind. The reason it matters is if we pull back, you have a summon. The main summon is the one we care about in this case. All summons have an aura, and some of the summon auras give a boost to specific weapon skills, and that's why we care about that being an Omega weapon. This summon, Celeste Omega, boosts Omega weapons. As you can see, 1% boost to Mistfall weapon skills. That means you want to use, generally speaking, weapons that have Mistfall skills because they're all going to benefit from Celeste Omega. There's some nuance there, and we'll get to that in a second, but that's the important first step. You want alignment between your summon and the weapons in your grid. Omega, however, is not the only type of weapon skill. There's also primal/normal weapon skills. Both those terminologies mean the same thing, essentially. Oblivion's Might 3 here, obviously it's not Mistfall, so it's not Omega. This is a normal modifier weapon. You can tell that it also has a different symbol. It doesn't have the Omega symbol in the corner. Why this matters is just like the Celeste summon, there is a summon that works for normal modifier weapons, which is Hades. The Hades summon boosts Dark, Hatred, and Oblivion weapon skills. The normal modifier weapon skills don't have a unified name like Mistfall. They probably should get one at some point, and they probably will, but for now they do have a split name like that. But yes, these are normal weapon skills. The general dichotomy is Omega weapons are all farmable. A lot of normal modifier weapons, especially the really good ones, are exclusively from gacha or are very hard to acquire. That's how it breaks down. In addition to Omega and normal, there are also EX mod weapons. This is an EX weapon skill on this Rungo Miniad. Unlike Omega and normal, all EX weapon skills have their own unique name, but you can tell what they are by looking at their symbol, the EX in the corner. Also, unlike Omega and normal, there isn't really a summon that boosts specifically EX weapons, so you don't really see grids that are entirely EX weapons. Also worth noting, there are summons that don't specifically boost a type of weapon skill, so like Celeste boosts Omega weapons, Hades boosts normal weapons. Bahamut, on the other hand, just boosts dark attack. So you can use a Bahamut with either type of weapon. It's a little bit more flexible in that way. Though it's not really applicable to a new player, but on the far edges of the power scale, so like when you're very endgame, double Hades, for example, is going to be stronger than Hades plus Bahamut. So that's a thing to know. But if you do have a Bahamut or Lucifer or like Shiva or Europa, any of those kind of summons, they give you a little bit more flexibility early on because you can switch back and forth a bit. So you might logically assume that I am using a summon that boosts normal weapon skills, so I should use a grid comprised of weapons entirely that have normal weapon skills on them to get the maximum bonus because all of them would be boosted. That's a logical conclusion, but it's actually not the case, and that's because the math that runs the damage formula is a little bit more complicated than that. I did a video, which you can look for, that is a detailed explanation of the damage formula, but that's way more than beginner level. So we're just going to try and give you a easier to digest version of it. And that is the different weapon skill types. So normal, omega, EX, there's more, but see the detailed explanation for those. All those are treated as their own multiplier, effectively. If you've done grade school math, you know that when you add several things together, you usually get a lower sum than if you multiply multiple things together. So what that effectively means is, in order to make an effective grid, you want a mixture of different weapon skills. You want some normal, a little bit of omega, a little bit of EX. So to get into that, I can give you some general guidelines, but what you should do really depends on the specific weapons you're talking about. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at my weapon grid here, it's 10 weapons, 7 of which are normal mod, so they match my summon, and then 2 are EX, and 1 is omega. That does not mean that is the right split for you. It's going to depend on the specific numbers on each of those weapons. And that's why building a grid can be a little bit tricky, and that's part of the skill and the experimentation that goes into getting the exact right combination you want. General guidelines, the majority of weapons in your grid should match your summon. And then 1 or 2 should be EX mod, and then 1 or 2 should be the weapon skill that doesn't match your summon. And that will get you in relatively the right ballpark. There are exceptions in very specific grids where the ideal case doesn't, for example, run an omega mod or an EX mod. That's going to be entirely case by case, and that's more deep than we need to get to in this discussion, but keep that general advice in mind, that you want a little bit of everything, and primarily you want your weapon skills, though, to match your summon. There are a ton of sites you can use that give you very good advice about what weapon grids are meta at the time. There's a bunch of damage calculators you could use to really fine-tune your different choices. But if you want a quick and dirty idea of how much your characters are going to do, this estimated damage field actually has grown considerably more useful over time. The improvements here are actually part of the reason why I wanted to do an update to this video. So as you can see here, this is the damage I would do against the light foe. This is the damage I would do against a not light foe. You click the eye up here, you can change out a bunch of parameters. So you can change your support summon. Support summon is your friend summon. When you're in a fight, you have your summon and their aura, and then a friend summon and their aura, and both auras apply. So we're switching that out. Let's switch out Bahamut for another Hades, which actually raises my maximum damage against light, but lowers it against elements that aren't light. So very fine amount of detail you can get out of it from here. You can also change the amount of remaining HP. This is relevant if you're running weapon skills like Stamina or Enmity. I did videos on those as well if you want to know more about those. But those care about how much HP you have. I'm running Enmity, so I want low HP. If I were on full HP, my damage goes from 800k down to a paltry 124k. So those are nice things you can adjust here as well. You also change the number of foes and turn number. In general, this is going to be a pretty useful tool for figuring out the ideal setup of weapons. Now, note, you can't slot weapons experimentally in here if you don't have them. So if I wanted to see if I did more damage if I removed this Omega mod and switched it with this Parazonium, then I could do that because I have both, and they're both maximum skill and maximum level. If you don't have the weapon you want to try out, then you're kind of shit out of luck. And that's where a damage calculator, where you can plug in any old weapon and get that information, is useful, and I do recommend doing that if you really want to play around with different options. But know that that's a useful tool these days. Another tool that has improved dramatically over the years is this auto select feature. Auto select will basically try its best to build a team for you, select weapons for you, select summons for you. And it used to not get you anywhere close to where you need to be. It made some really bad decisions before. Now it will get you about 80% of the way there. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look. So if I were to want to switch this team to light, let's just do it. Fun for both of us. It gives me Lucifer as my main summon. That's almost right. Lucifer's a fine like main summon, but a better main summon would be Zeus. So it gets you close. Not completely right, but not completely wrong either. Let's see what it does with the grid. So we'll switch the grid over to light. And let's see. So I wouldn't argue with all of these choices. There's a couple things I might change out. I don't think I would run this Huanglong Spear here, or the Katana for that matter, or the Xeno Sword. But like those are changes that won't make a huge difference. This is like in the ballpark of right, the point where you could use this and not be too mad about it. Let's see what it does with characters. I actually haven't done this. And the characters, like all the other choices, not the ideal choice, but not completely a terrible choice of characters either. So keep in mind, if you have no idea what you're doing and you just want to put a team together slapdash really fast, you can use that, and it will get you most of the way to where you need to be. But do remember that some fine-tuning is going to be needed to get you all the way there. Some more guidance. What weapon should you prioritize? Generally speaking, you want to be using weapons that are the highest possible skill level, uncap, and attack that match your summon. That means for a new player, that's probably gonna be Omega mod weapons. So, for example, Leviathan Gaze Omega. This thing is really easy to get. Leviathan, you're going to fight it real soon in your progression. And you'll get to summon pretty easy as well. And those things matching are going to make a huge difference. Generally speaking, limited weapons are going to be stronger. They're just going to have better stats. Weapons from gacha, basically. However, it's hard to get those to full uncap because they require multiple copies of themselves. So like Blutgang here is a great weapon for Dark. However, at 0 stars, it's not a great weapon for Dark because it doesn't unlock its final skill, and it's going to be really low base attack, and its skill cap's going to be 10 instead of 15. So in general, you want to prioritize the weapons you can actually fully upgrade. Weapons like this, really, the way you're going to fully upgrade these are with Damascus. This is a fine Damascus target, in fact. But in general, you're going to start with Omega, and then if you want to make the jump to Primal, you totally can, but it's going to require a lot of work and investment, and going to be dependent a lot on how much resources you put in the game, how much you roll on gacha, how much Damascus you end up getting, that kind of thing. For the sake of completeness, plus marks. Some people are wondering what these are, probably. These things give raw stats to a weapon. So Gisla by default is 2,810 attack. If we add in plus 99, which is maximum per weapon here, this will become 3,305 attack. A significant improvement. These things make a huge difference, especially if you're running a grid that is entirely plus marked up. Summons can also take plus marks. Characters can also take plus marks. If you want to remove your plus marks, you can. You just do reset plus mark here. It's going to cost you a bunch of rupees. But that will actually send the plus marks back to your mailbox to let you put them somewhere else. So they're never wasted. So don't worry about that too much, but that's what that is. So hopefully that has been helpful. I know it's a lot to absorb, but Granblue Fantasy is a very complicated game, even by gacha game standards. If you have additional questions, feel free to ask them down below. Also, check out the rest of my channel if you have more specific questions, because I have a bunch of videos covering the other mechanics of the game, and there's a lot to go over. If you've enjoyed this, leave a like, subscribe, all that usual YouTube stuff, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye!